Hello YouTube Vintage Stereo Restorers. Got a really cool looking unit here. This is a Nikko TRM-50 and it's from 1969. I think they made them for 2 model years. And it's got the look. I mean, the wood grain sideburns, beautiful aluminum front, solid machined aluminum knobs. That's not a plastic insert. And these big flip switches. Oh, the power's right there. It reminds me of a 68 Dodge Polara dashboard. Anyway, this one's had quite a bit of work done on it. The output, well, how to put it, it has the Nikko circuit packs to repair the output ICs. So this amp was an early user of circuit packs. So there's 2 in the phono section, 2 on the tone board, and then there were 2 down as a preamp driver stage, and only 4 transistors. So this was the actual Nikko fix, and it's working okay. The outputs are tip 41Cs, and it should actually be something like a 2SD91, a TO66, the original. This is a little bit too heavy duty in output for these small transistors to drive, and which is giving it sort of I'm gonna put a flat sound, not a lot of guts. I listened to some music through headphones, and it wasn't bad, but I was listening at 3/4 volume just to make my old ears work. So which is a little bit off. Basically what's happening is the outputs aren't kicking in, and we can actually prove that. I suspect it. So I'm going to do, that's my hypothesis, the outputs aren't working. So let's see if we can prove it. How do we prove it? Well, we put a meter and measure a few things. Well, that's the screw that holds down each one. So being quasi-complementary, the top of the single rail is 49 volts. Center voltage is 20. It should be exactly half. So we have a mismatch there. It's not able to drive them hard enough to get basically you have 0 volts, 49 volts in the middle is your center voltage. And let me put it to you this way, it's the only way they could get a transistor circuit to work in those days with 2 NPNs or 2 PNPs. And of course there's a coupling capacitor. Let's go down to the lower voltage scale. Over here, the emitter resistors. So let's just see what we're reading. Oh, which one is it? Yeah, that's the right one there. So we have sort of a floating bias, like it's a little bit off. It's barely, almost kicking 3 millivolts. Yeah, this one, see that? It's only like 0.1, 0.2 millivolts. It's not enough to turn those on. They need 0.6 to turn on. And this is the difference between tubes and transistors. A tube is basically a valve. It's like a spigot, you know? You can have full off, full on, and in between. It controls the flow. A transistor is a switch that operates at high speed. So basically your audio is made up of little snippets. It's going, it's like the little bird on the Flintstones. Okay, I'm going to use a Flintstones analogy. They take a picture with their Polaroid camera, and the bird goes with its beak on the picture and makes the picture. Then it goes, voila! It's sort of like a transistor, sort of like that. It's assembled, it's basically a whole series of the switch turning off and on, which basically it turns so far on to this point, it builds up in one direction by turning off and on, like a 300 megahertz transistor. That's what it basically means. It operates at 300 megahertz. That's quite a few times. Then basically the other transistor takes over and does the bottom half of the waveform. So if you don't have enough bias turning those just slightly on, you need to turn them slightly on for them to work. That needs to be their starting point. Without that, they're not coming on until really late. And you end up with an amp that just sounds a little off. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put some originals back in there and then readjust the bias to where it should be around 10 to 12 millivolts. Then I've got to do something about, there's another little problem on this one. The left channel of the phono, it was dead the first time I tried it, and there's a reason for that. I think it's been shorted at one time, but it actually came back on the next time I turned on the amp. And tapping around didn't do it, putting my finger on it didn't do it. What I actually did is on the power lead of that, with the thing off of course, I heated it up with a soldering iron. And so the heat would travel inside the module, and then turned it on, and it was on until it cooled off. So there's a connection problem that's affected by heat and cold inside there. And it's basically a little board with stuff, just tiny little ticks of solder on, there are actually components in there. I might even be able to open it up and restuff it. That'll be another video. But I used to use that cooling spray, to test for this kind of stuff, and it's kind of not good for the ozone, not good to breathe either. That's another way to do things. I find with a lot of ICs, even just holding the soldering iron over it, not to the point that it melts or anything, will affect it. And I've done that with transistors too that I think are intermittent. I will actually turn it on, it sounds okay. I'll just hold it, just like 1/4 inch away. And then all of a sudden you'll hear the problem come on. You'll hear like starting, especially with the old wedge transistors. And look what's on those boards. A couple wedge transistors. So this one's going to be really interesting. These are a good sounding amp, and it'll be another one of these small sleeper amps they're really popular now. And this is one thing I've noticed with some of the stuff. The bigger monster receivers, not monster, but let's say mid to monster, there's not as many people buying them because they've also kind of gone up in price, especially if it says Sensui or Yamaha on it, or Pioneer. Stuff like this you can get at a lower price, and it performs. And I've always been a bigger fan. This is just my personal taste, and that's really what audio comes down to, is personal taste. I've always liked a separate amp and tuner. Always been my favorite. They're just kind of like, that's what I started out with. Well, actually I started out with an AM radio kit from Radio Shack, but anyway, I prefer separate with a separate tuner. But actually, a lot of the receivers from that time, if you worked on them or just looked inside them, you'll see that, wait a minute, that's the amp board and the transformer that's in such and such a receiver. Like, oh, what is it? The Yamaha A450 and the CR400 have basically the same amplifier inside. But we'll get working on this and do a few videos. Thanks for watching and listening.